Hello, this is Mr. Chabry, and we're here with another narrated Pokemon battle. So this is a battle against MattBlue. He wanted to do a underused battle, but he also wanted to bring Mew, so I decided to allow it. And so that's why you see underused teams, but with one Mew. So looking at my opponent's team, he has all the legendary beasts, and that's actually pretty interesting. He also has the Terrakion and the Ditto, and I think the Ditto is honestly the scariest thing on my opponent's team, really. I'm going to lead with the Kumo. It takes decent hits, especially from those legendary beasts. But looking at this, he leads with the Ditto, and I'm scared that this thing might be Scarfed, because most Dittos are Scarfed. So what I'm going to do is actually go into my Klefki, as my opponent's going to go ahead and go for Outrage, trying to hit my Kumo as hard as he can. Another thing about him leading off with Ditto, he knows my Kumo set, so that's actually not that great. It is a Dragon Dance Kumo set. My opponent's going to go into Entei, probably expecting a Fairy-type move. I'm going to go Thunder Wave, as I end up missing the Thunder Wave. That kind of sucks. But I'm going to go into Kumo. The main reason is I think keeping Klefki alive is very important. That will help out. I could possibly get a Thunder Wave on the Ditto later on. And besides, if I get burnt on Kumo, my Sylveon is a Cleric set. It has Wish, and it also has Heal Bell, so I'm not too worried about burns here. But now we're burnt, and that's kind of annoying, though, because we won't do as much damage as we can. And I'm just going to go close combat. I'm thinking the Entei is probably banded, maybe. I'd have to do some calcs to know for sure, but most Enteis are banded, so with that in mind, I think Kumo is pretty safe, but not safe in the face of the Suicune, because Suicune probably has Blizzard, probably has Ice Beam, and this one actually ends up having Icy Wind, so that's pretty interesting. I'm going to go with Sylveon. Sylveon has really beautiful special defense. Even with the speed drop, it doesn't matter, because Sylveon is naturally slow as well, so we don't have to worry about the speed, holding us back. And I'm just going to go for a Heal Bell. Heal Bell will really help out because we need that Kumo not burnt. Because if I want to get a KO with Kumo, I need it not burnt. So that's what I'm going to do as my opponent brings in the Ditto. Probably to scout out, see what set I have. He's probably wanting to Wish Pass to some things because he could probably do that with this set. Of course, I'm still thinking that this is probably a Scarf set. I'm not totally for sure yet. But I do have the Heal Bell. And what I want to do is to Thunder Wave this thing, because I'm still playing under the assumption that it could be Scarfed, and I do not want it Scarfed. So I want to Thunder Wave it, that way it's not going to be that much of a threat to my Pokemon. So now that I have Klefki in here, that's what I'm going to do, is just Thunder Wave as my opponent actually protects. I do have Protect on the Sylveon. Like I said, it is a Wish Passing set, and it's really nice to have Protect on your Wish Passer, just in case you need to get some health back on it. But with that in mind, my opponent does get to see what I'm going to go for, and I'm going for Thunder Wave. This also tells us that this is not Scarf, too, so I'm not totally sure what set this is. But I'm actually going to go Spikes here, expecting my opponent to bring in Raikou on the Thunder Wave. But my opponent doesn't. My opponent actually just Hyper Voices again. And looking at this, I think this might be a pretty decent time to get up some Spikes. So that's what I'm going to do. I don't know why my opponent is continuing the Hyper Voice here. But I'm just going to start setting up Spikes. And maybe that will help me out in the long run. And I do feel a little bit better knowing this is not a Scarf set. But I still want to Thunder Wave it, just because I do not want to have to rely on Speed Ties whenever Ditto comes out. So that's what I'm going to do at this point. I'm going to go ahead, paralyze this thing. I have two layers of Spikes now, so that's actually very nice. And that's going to help me out in this battle, because whenever anything comes in, it's going to break sashes, and it's going to take some damage. Now I'm going to go into Chandelure. I'm pretty sure my opponent's just going to go for another Hyper Voice. My opponent does make a good play here, going for the Heal Bell that this thing does have, since it is my Sylveon. I was actually pretty sure my opponent would do that, and that's why I felt like I had a free switch into my beautiful Chandelure. So now that I have Chandelure out, I'm just going to go Shadow Ball. I do know my opponent has Suicune and Entei, so Fire Blast wouldn't make sense. Of course, I don't want to risk going for Energy Ball, because my opponent does have things that don't care about Energy Ball. And the Shadow Ball actually gets a crit, so I don't know if that mattered, but it's actually pretty helpful because Suicune is pretty bulky. I do know that. It might have helped there, but I'm just going to go for another Shadow Ball and finish off this Suicune, and this is actually a Scarfed Chandelure set. So my opponent sends out Mew, probably expecting me not to be Scarfed, but I'm just going to go for another Shadow Ball. There's not a reason for me not to, and we're going to take a knockoff, so we're actually going to lose our Scarf at this point. But Chandelure has already done what I really needed it to do. It took out Suicune, and it put a big dent in this Mew. Of course, Mew could, have Roost, and that's going to be a problem. But I'm going to go into Sharpedo, expecting maybe a Shadow Ball of its own, maybe a Psychic move. But the thing I have to be careful about with Sharpedo here is because Ditto could still be a problem, and this is actually my Mega. So what I need to do is make sure my opponent doesn't get a reverse sweep with the Ditto. So my opponent actually brings out Raikou at this point, and switches out the Mew. I guess my opponent decided Mew still could do some work in this, but I'm going to protect. That way I could scout out, see what the Mew would go for. But now Raikou is here, and I really don't like this matchup. Of course, we do have a +1 speed, but I don't really feel safe in attacking this Raikou at this point because I know Raikou is really fast. So I'm going to go into my Sylveon. This thing is my special defense wall, and it takes that Thunderbolt pretty well. Of course, Sylveon is really good special defense-wise. It's really good Cleric Pokemon, but my opponent's going to bring in the Ditto once again. Of course, this thing is no longer paralyzed, and that's still kind of a problem. But if I can, play my cards right, I could possibly paralyze it again and try my best not to let it steal my Sylveon. So I'm going to go for a Wish this time because, I really need to heal up my Chandelure because Chandelure took that nasty knockoff, of course. Chandelure is pretty good in this battle, plus I know I can bring it in here. I do know my only attacking move on my Sylveon is Hyper Voice, and it's not going to do much to Chandelure, so I feel pretty safe in bringing it in here and getting this nice Wish. And now my opponent's actually going to switch out and bring Mew back in. Of course, I no longer have my Scarf, so I'm not going to be locked into anything. I'm going to actually Trick at this point, mainly because I did get knocked off, and I want to take an item. I want Chandelure to have some sort of item, and I'm actually going to take those leftovers. Unfortunately, this thing's going to get some health back, and I do know, or I'm pretty sure that this Mew will outspeed my Chandelure because I've lost my Scarf. Of course, this might not be a speed-invested Mew. That's a thing. And I'm going to go into Sharpedo as my opponent tries to go for a knockoff onto my Chandelure, trying to get rid of those leftovers. And I just go for a crunch here. It's not enough to take out Mew, but we do get a nice speed boost here. The thing I just noticed, though, is we actually outsped the Mew first turn. So maybe I didn't really have to worry that much. I'm not sure. But now my opponent's going to bring out the Ditto, and I'm kind of nervous about this because, of course, it's going to take my speed boost from me. I'm going to just crunch again to finish off the Mew. We get some nice damage on this thing at least, so that's actually something good. And it's going to hold up its red card on me, so that's actually pretty interesting. But I'm going to go into Superior. I'm pretty sure Superior can take anything this thing wants to go for, even an Ice Fang, because Superior does have decent bulk. But we're going to be frozen. So that's actually very, very unfortunate. We just got frozen by our own Sharpedo, and this thing is getting a nasty speed boost every time. So that's actually very unfortunate. We're going to take another Ice Fang, but we actually dodge and Superior thaws out. So that's actually pretty lucky there, because a lot of times your Pokemon won't thaw out if they're frozen. They're frozen for the entire battle. So we got some nice luck after, getting very unlucky and getting frozen. So now that this thing is finally able to attack, it takes out the Sharpedo, and now Popsicle the Entei is back on the field. And of course, Superior does not want to face this thing. This thing is a big threat. So I'm actually going to switch out and go into my Chandelure. I'm expecting the Sacred Fire. Of course, this is not a Flash Fire set. This is an Infiltrator set. But, I mean, if there's anything that can take a Sacred Fire, it's Chandelure. So we take that Sacred Fire very well, and this thing actually reveals that it has Stomping Tantrum. So that actually took me off guard there. Of course, it gets the crit. I don't know if it mattered. Probably not. Stomping Tantrum does have decent attack, and it has like a weird effect where if the previous turn the Pokemon's move failed, it does more damage. It's an interesting move, and we see it right there. I'm going to go into my Sharpedo at this point, as my opponent brings the Raikou out once again. I'm going to protect. I don't want to take a Sacred Fire and get burnt, but we get a nice speed boost there. And I know most Raikous usually carry a Z move, so I kind of make an awkward decision here. Instead of protecting again to get another speed boost, I just go ahead and Mega Evolve, and I'm hoping that I can outspeed, but I don't. And we lose Sharpedo there, where we probably didn't even need to lose Sharpedo. If I went for Protect, got another speed boost, then Mega Evolved, pretty sure I would have outsped Raikou at that point. But I took a risky play. It didn't pay off. But I was actually scared of Raikou possibly having a Z move there, and I probably should have played a little bit better. I'm going to go into Klefki at this point, go for a Thunder Wave. I don't know if anything Scarf, but I'm thinking maybe Terrakion Scarf. My opponent has a lot of Pokemon that could decently be Scarfed. So we go for the Thunder Wave, we get the Paralysis, and that's helping us out against this thing. This thing's actually a decent threat as well. I'm going to play Rough. It's super effective on this thing, and it's nice chip damage. So that's what I do, as my opponent's actually going to go for a Sacred Sword. Klefki actually ends up surviving, so that's actually very nice for me. We still have our Klefki. I can just go for another Play Rough. There's not a reason for me not to, and Klefki gets a nice KO here. Most of the time you see Klefki just being used for utility, but I like having an attacking move on it, just in case, you know, Klefki comes out and has a decent chance of doing some damage. But now my opponent's going to go back into the Entei, and of course, Klefki does not like the matchup against the Entei. Entei can do a lot of damage to Klefki, but at this point I'm thinking Klefki isn't really useful anymore. What I want to do is paralyze this thing now, and that's what I'm going to do. Go for a nice Thunder Wave, and we paralyze the Entei and we get a full paralysis. So that's actually kind of lucky on my side now. My opponent got some luck with the freeze. I'm getting some luck with the paralysis, and I'm going to go ahead and get that last layer of spikes. That's something that's been bothering me since I got the first two up. Let's go ahead and finish that off. And Entei is actually paralyzed again, so this is actually working out very well now at this point. This thing's getting a lot of paralysis, and I'm just going to play Rough. I don't really want to switch out. I'm going to just let Klefki go down. Klefki has done its job. It's set up the spikes. It's Thunder Wave, key Pokemon that I need slowed down, and it's looking really good. And Como is actually looking pretty good. I can bring it in now. I don't have to worry that much. Of course, a Sacred Fire burn is still an issue for me, but it's not that bad of an issue. And Raikou is going to actually be swapped back in here. And what I want to do is actually pop my Z move. I was actually scared of going Dragon Dance because I might get burnt. So I'm going to go ahead, pop the Z move, and do as much damage as possible to either Entei or whatever my opponent ends up swapping in. And I'm hoping that we're able to take out this Raikou, because if that's possible, my opponent doesn't really have that many Pokemon that's a huge threat to me anymore. So that's what we're going to do. Just go for the Devastating Drake. And we end up finishing off the Raikou. So that's pretty nice. Of course, my opponent still has the Mew, and I'm not too worried about Mew. Of course, Mew's going to go down to the spikes anyway, so of course, there's nothing to worry about with Mew. But that just leaves the Entei, and I'm not too worried about Entei. It is paralyzed, and it does take a lot of spike damage here. So Como is actually looking very nice here. I'm just going to lock myself into Outrage, do as much damage as I can, and we end up taking out Entei the Popsicle. So, if you like this battle, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you in the next Pokemon video.